Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Marius Franklin, AERIUS for the interpreter. I'm an April board member and a moderator of the meeting today. Thank you for joining the workshop, Peer Support Group for IELTS Specialists, in parentheses, NHT, IELTS Skills Training, INR Housing, etc. I want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started today. First, when you scroll over a screen, a menu bar pops up. Depending on what device you're on, you can find that menu bar at the top or bottom of the screen. This is where you will find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view the captioning by selecting the closed captioning tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, you can find the interpreter on the screen with the name. If you are only able to see the speaker, make sure you are in gallery view so you can see the interpreter and the presentation at the same time. You can find the option to change the view at the top of your screen under a tab for view. If you would like to see the interpreter larger, you can choose to pin them. You can go to the top right-hand corner of the interpreter square and select that will give you the option to pin. You can make them larger by pinning and then selecting speaker view. If you have technical issues, please use the chat feature. You can find the word bubble in the same menu bar. Once that is selected, that will allow you to follow along with the chat or add in your comments. If you would like to turn the chat feature off, if you are using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing Alt-H. To ask a question or make a comment, you can also select the hand option on the menu bar that allows us to know you have a question. For those of you on the phone today or using keystrokes, we ask that you press *9 or Alt-Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute, and you can select the unmute option Alt-A if using keystrokes. Remember, if you join into the conversation, please keep all background noise down as much as possible to allow us to hear you clearly. As a last reminder, April in our conference is a safe and inclusive space for marginalized communities. We ask that everyone present in this session today treat each other with respect, and that you can enter this and every session with good intentions. This includes respecting names, pronouns, and other personal identifiers, and avoiding the use of harmful or derogatory language. And also, with that being said, this session will be recorded but not shared. So along with the safe space, you can say what you like. It will be recorded, but it won't be shared on the website. And I will let us begin. Thank you.
Cassie, hi. Take it away. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassie Waitman. I am from formerly Montana Independent Living Project. We last week changed our center's name to Ability Montana. And I have worked at my center for 13 years. So, and I identify as she, her. I have long, dark hair. And if you're comfortable, I would love if some folks would turn your camera on, just because I think it might help the dialogue. And to start the discussion, in the chat, if you would, let us know where your center is, maybe what the name and then the location, and how long you've been at that center. So let's just take a moment and do that so I can get an idea of where everyone's coming from today. And then once we kind of get a vibe for that, I just want to say that this is really meant to be interactive. I sat on the April board for about 4 years, a number of years ago, and and Arius and I were just talking about this. It's the best conference. And it really is so different when you get to do it in person, because you get that time with each other to connect and do this kind of dialoguing that helps you dream for your own job in your own center. So because that's not possible or as easy through Zoom, I'm really hoping we can really talk about some things that you've been doing at your center, things that you're proud of, things that you would like to share, and then we'll prompt it along if we're missing some stuff. So let's everybody in the chat say where you work, how long you've been there, and then we'll kind of go from there. And some folks probably have started, within COVID times, so maybe you're operating under a hybrid model, and some of that is changing things too, how we're doing business. Wow, Heather's been at Herstal for 17 years, Molly 10 years in Idaho, Becky 4 years in Austin. That's awesome. Okay, so looks like we have a really big variety of time worked at the centers. Wow, Heather, it's a long time. Okay, 2 years. If you're just joining, where you're working and how long you've been there would be great. And then, let's see, that might be close to everything. Okay, so I guess the first question I would have is, and so this, if you want to speak, Arius, what's the etiquette for just unmuting if you're wanting to speak, or?
Yes, or I'm not sure if we have a raised hand option. If you, oh yes, we do. If you want to speak, you can just unmute or raise your hand, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay, and then, Lydia just chimed in, 18 plus years at her center. So we have lots of really deep independent living knowledge and experience. And then some folks that are fairly new. So I guess when I go to a conference, I really want to have a takeaway. And so from this conversation, I'm hoping you either gain something from someone that is a training, a website, a resource, an idea, something that you feel like when you leave this conversation today, that you can put that into practice in yourself. And so I guess the first thing is has anybody been facing any challenges, maybe since COVID or just since your time at the cell, feeling like you don't know how to start, what a starting point is? Have you been struggling with, coming up with ideas? Like what are some of the challenges that you've been feeling in your center? And so just take a minute and kind of reflect on that. And then, or questions that you think you want to cover while we're in the session today would be great. Okay. And then from the April office, any resources that are shared today can be found on the conference session website after this meeting. So that will be important. So what are some barriers that you've been facing, or is it lack of starting points? Is it lack of resources that you're aware of? Is it training needs? Are you wondering, what are some historical things that have helped be an independent living specialist? So what I know is that everyone's office operates differently. My center, I have all the jobs. So I'm doing housing and transportation, everything is done. And then my counterpart, Kendra Brown, is on the call today as well. She is also doing those same things, where some centers are, I do transportation, I do youth, I do this. So that's going to affect how your job is, determined, right? So for me, one of the most important training resources I ever did was I did the work incentive planning and assistance training. Has anyone else done that training? Where you go and learn about Social Security and work incentives. Has anyone else done that? Kind of, okay. It's offered online. It's very intensive, but it gives you a really in-depth knowledge of Social Security. Okay, so Brenda had said, despite marketing and hybrid opportunities, we find low attendance at presentations, and it's an issue at other agencies as well. Arius took the training many moons ago. And so that is something, the Social Security, they call it WIPA training. If you're not familiar with that, I think we can find the link and get it up on the April website. If they are offering a free training to just get some base knowledge about that, I would highly recommend individuals spend some time going through that material if you haven't done that. Okay, so Becky said she used to be a job coach and have some knowledge. Okay, are people working? Do you find that you're interacting with people and their Social Security questions a lot at your job? Somewhat, okay. I think that's where centers differ, is that I end up being in my community, because it's small, the person that everybody calls when they have a Social Security question. And I think sometimes within centers, you get a reputation for X, Y, and Z, what you deliver. Are there some other topic areas like that that you feel like you get hit up with a lot? Okay, Justin says, yes, a lot of questions about Social Security. Okay, if you do get a lot of questions about Social Security, I will find that link and I will get it so that you can have it for sure. We have a WIPA program with staff that work like this. Oh, thank you. There's that link, but then there's the training link. I think it's through the Virginia Commonwealth, or it used to be. So we'll find that as well. Even if there's a WIPA program in your state, I have found it extremely helpful to have enough information to guide folks. Okay, so just yesterday, I met with somebody who is contemplating full-time employment. But in order to contemplate full-time employment, you have to take into consideration all these aspects. If you're on a Social Security disability or SSI benefit, you have to take into consideration, am I getting housing assistance? Am I getting SNAP? Am I getting, there's all kinds of things that need to be taken into consideration. So in order for us to help best support the individuals coming to the office, just having enough information about work incentives and how someone were to make that decision is incredibly important. Okay, Latira, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. You have a lot of questions about housing. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit? Okay, and then while we're thinking about some of the things that have been challenging, can you put also in the chat things that you have found to be really encouraging, helpful, that you think other people would want to know about? Can you put them in the chat? Okay, the question is not really knowing where to start. Okay, so do you feel comfortable unmuting and talking about this? And it's okay if you don't. Or if somebody else wants to talk about housing in your area, go ahead. I see that you're unmuted.
Hi, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So mostly when I'm talking to people, they're really like low income and stuff like that. And so when I have to like do a little bit of research, I do give them like a list of different houses that have low income, but sometimes that's not enough. And so I refer them to like agencies that may help with like assistance paying for like a deposit or first and last month's rent. But then that will get in the way where like they run out of funding as well. So now we have to look at like, see if they have any evictions and then try to pay off those evictions maybe and go from there. So like a lot of the times I just don't know where to start or go from there. So.
I think that sounds like, what community are you in? Do you mind sharing?
Michigan, Muskegon community, but we serve 4 other counties as well.
Okay, so in Michigan.
Yeah, Muskegon, Michigan, mostly.
So I think that you're probably having the same discussions with folks that all of us are having. Yeah. I know that we're having a housing crisis everywhere. And so this I don't know how you guys are working through your center, but for me, we're not a good crisis space, right? We're not a place that people in housing crisis can really, we don't have funding at our center. So I can't pay rent, I can't do those things. So what I've been finding is we're best serving folks that have an anticipation of a next step, right? We're saying, you know, our job at the center, and it sounds like you're doing exactly what you can do, which is meeting them where they are and then getting them to the appropriate resources that have the chance of helping them. I haven't seen anything different. I urge any of you to step in on this conversation. If you've been having a different experience, to please share what you've noticed in your area about housing and things that you're having or things that you've tried that have made a difference. Does anyone have anything to share? Oh, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm in upstate New York, and we are starting to meet with our social service agencies, our housing agencies and landlords to try to have actual conversations with them, because we're having the same thing that across our region. Housing is one of the #1 issues, and trying to balance that we're not an emergency service, but people have emergencies when they walk in. To trying to make sure to connect them and our staff knowing who can I call at what time to start this process is really tricky. And we're finding more people that make too much money, quote unquote, so they can't get the emergency temporary assistance from the social service agency, but they don't have enough money to get an apartment, or they have some other barrier. So it's definitely a challenge. I just was talking with one of my staff. We have a person who just got diagnosed with cancer. They have some mobility challenges, and we cannot find them an accessible apartment. So they're sleeping in a tent, and it's 50 right now during the day, and we keep trying.
Yeah. So, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that balance of, we're getting calls of crisis all the time. And when there's not good answers, it can feel very defeating. And so for me, I always go back to, this is a systems issue, right? So we're trying to address these issues with folks when we can, when we get them. And then when we have some capacity, that's when centers, our job is to try to help fix systems. It's getting a hold of our legislators. It's finding what housing advocacy groups on a state level exist if we're having a lack of housing, lack of affordable housing, lack of accessible housing. How do we become synonymous with advocacy in our states? And I'm sure many of you are doing an incredible job of that, but it starts at our local level. So in my community, we have a continuum of care group that meets. And I don't know if you have that in your communities or if you've heard that term, but they really operate around the assumption of, like, you know, we want housing to be, you know, not this thing that's not available to people. And we don't want it to be crisis. We want people to be housed. And so it starts on that local level of what are the groups that are meeting. If you're not already part of those groups, really getting in there, introducing yourself, being part of that dialogue, sharing the stories of the individuals that you're serving to let them know, you know, what you're seeing. And then from there, how do we get involved in our state conversation? So Montana, the television show Yellowstone was filmed in Montana, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted to live in Montana, it felt like, right? Because we are a very rural state. Well, that caused a really incredible housing crisis, and it made the costs of housing go way beyond what's affordable for folks. So the governor recognizes this crisis, but he started a group and didn't even have one representative of the disability community on there. And so, you know, as a center, then it's like, hey, you know, we got to change this. And so it's having those conversations, because we really have to start at the systems level to try to work down, while trying to help folks when we get those hard phone calls, to try to say, these are the resources we have. These are the other things I can help you with while we try to get you stable. Because that part is just, where can you go in the day if it's cold? Where can you, you know, do you have the right stuff if you have to sleep in a tent? Those all feel very impossible. And I know we're all just dealing with it. And let's not forget, I mean, we have to be taking care of ourselves too, because we're hearing a lot of hard stories all the time. And if you're taking them home with you or you don't have an outlet for that, I mean, really take care of yourself in this time. I have felt since COVID, a big shift in independent living and just more folks not getting their needs met. Food is expensive right now. Housing is a problem. So really doing what you can, knowing your own limits so that you don't, work yourself into a space where you can't do a job like this anymore. It's very, very upsetting. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Caitlin in the chat box had said for the SIL that they're at, we have a lot of housing coordinators and quite a bit of agencies through a program that we can direct people to. We do teach skills and help with disability rights questions, but there's a lot of community collaboration that we're doing. And that seems to be very helpful as we're building relationships with other agencies to work together. So yeah, anyone have anything else about housing that you feel like has been profound in creating change in your own communities? And if something comes up to you later, please just add that into the chat. How about, I'm kind of just curious, has anyone do you feel like you're having time to do activities within your center that feel really exciting to help move your center ahead in ways that are thinking outside of the box? Have you had time to do that? Do you feel like you're so pressed trying to help people that are kind of in emergencies all the time that it's hard to even get, to the space where you're like, I can do this with somebody, or I can create peer opportunities that feel really profound? What's your time balance? Are you getting enough of that? Yes. So So Arius just said, we'll put all the resources on the website. This year we did something new at our center, and it was kind of born out of, we have a women's group that meets, over Zoom. They started meeting over Zoom, and then we had a coffee date one day, and these ladies were just sitting around a table telling stories about, who they are, and then, elements of having a disability and funny things that have happened. And all of a sudden we were just like, well, would you ever tell your story on stage? Would you ever want to do that? And so we last year from November to May worked with a local theater company, and we had 8 people that wanted to tell their stories, and they spent time writing their stories, working with writers. And then in May of this year, we called it Speaking Our Truth, and we had them perform it on stage. We found an accessible venue in our town. It was a theater production, kind of like, Vagina Monologue, something similar to that. And those 8 individuals got up and told their story. And I had a woman who has cystic fibrosis that said, in all the years of counseling that she's done, nothing has helped heal her heart more than telling her story. And so I'm wondering, do you have things like that you've been doing, or things that you are like, I'm really worried about people being lonely, or I'm worried about people not having the right connections to their community, so that someone's kind of keeping an eye out on them, as we head into the dark winter months? Okay. Darius, is this comment from you? The vaccine comment?
Yes.
Will you elaborate on that? And then Alex next.
So the reason why I said that is because I live in California, and so if you guys heard about the big Caldor fire that happened here last year, I was right in the middle of that, and so that kind of took over everything we were doing. And then when I talk about COVID and vaccinations, just all of that information that came out trying to make sure that the elderly population or people who needed to get the shots and needed transportation to get to that, as a center, we had to focus more on that. So when you ask the question, do you feel like, emphasis on do you feel like? So I didn't feel like I got to do what I wanted to do, but I must say this, in the height of the whole COVID scare and things that went on, we were able, while everything was shut down, I was very instrumental in having a youth transition fair happen, a drive-up fair that happened, and a youth transition fair hadn't been in the county that I work in for 6 years prior to that. And we will have our third one coming up. The first two were drive-up, but this one is actually in person. And just the amount of love we received and participation we received for the first two had me excited. And then also, we had to reschedule everything because of the fire that happened here as well. But we were able to get it rescheduled. And then we have a senior resource fair coming up. And that's big because there's been small ones put on by like the retirement communities and things like that. But this one is actually being hosted and coordinated by a SEAL. And the turnout for it, just for vendors, because everything was free of charge, was 30 to 40 people. So that's big when you ask. Now I feel like we're doing what we came here to do.
I love
and
that.
I'll just end my thought right there.
Well, I'm just, if you don't mind elaborating a little bit on the youth fair, like what were you providing when people were driving up? Like what did that look like?
So since it was COVID, we couldn't really, the handshakes and things like that. So what we were providing were information and resources from other agencies geared towards like job coaching if they needed it, like Alta Regional vocational rehabilitation information there. And we also had a slot for the agencies that couldn't be there. They could leave their information on a table and then a question box. So we had people write questions to those agencies that couldn't attend in the hopes that they would follow up with the youth that had those questions. And we also had, for the families, we had the same organizations there, but then we did it a little bit different to where we had specific information that catered around, that was tailored around support for the families of the individual, what to expect as a mother going to an IEP, or if your youth or child wants to live on their own, how you can help and what approach you could take in order to ensure that your child or your youth transitions very well so they don't have to come back home as often,
That's awesome.
Something to that effect.
So Alex is going to go next, but I just, along those lines of thinking, I think sometimes when we think about our jobs, there's so many things that we could be doing. I don't know about you guys, but it's overwhelming. If you think about all the things you could be doing to make, your community, your area, just a more inclusive place, a more accessible place, a place where people feel welcome, like all those things, you can get so overwhelmed that you almost do nothing. It's just like, where do I even start? If you're not sure of your starting point, if you're new at a center, I would really encourage you to find your passion point within your center. What makes you feel excited? Like, what is your drive? You're gonna have to do all those other jobs, but if you find those things that when you leave an activity or you leave a meeting with people, if it's education, if it's facilitating stuff, whatever it is, if you leave that makes you feel good, that's your guiding light for what you want to do. For me, I love doing walkability in my community, and I'll talk about that after Alex goes because I don't want to delay any longer. Go ahead, Alex.
Sure, yeah, so we've been pretty creative with doing things outside because our COVID numbers are getting pretty scary. And so chasing after little grants where we did employment in the park and just had the same conversation, but we're hanging out in the park that had an accessible splash pad and pool as well. And also trying to find little jobs for volunteers to do when they don't need to be time linked. So we have people that will come in, you know, once a week and they want to shred. So they come in for 30 minutes, but they feel connected. They feel like they're, you know, like doing something. They're not ready to want to talk about career stuff, but they want to be a part of the movement. So whether it's, you know, scooping ice cream at an ice cream fundraiser or shredding or answering phones or whatever, just trying to help people feel like they have a part of us.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. A couple things. I'm only, you guys, I'm only talking a lot because if you're not saying things, I have to keep it going. So I will just tell you a couple of things that we've done here. I partnered with another organization. Oh, Heather, let's see what she said first. I agree with finding the passion to make a difference, but even after 17 years, you still feel that feeling of you are not doing enough, and there's so much more that you could be doing, just not enough time, resources in a day.
Yeah.
And Heather, if you want to elaborate, I'd love it.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt anybody. Sorry.
No, that's perfect.
So that's, but yeah, even after 17 years, there's new stuff comes about, new programs come about, it's like my husband says that I never stop working, because even when you're out in the community, you're just trying to find stuff, find information, find resources. Wait a second. Oh, do you know about this? Do you know about, so yeah.
100%. And I really appreciate you saying that, especially being someone that's been part of this movement for 17 years. Like that's the other part of these jobs is if you can sustain your balance, your center within yourself, you can do these forever, because there's no end to the work to be done here. But it is all about tempering how much you're putting pressure on yourself to do it. So I really appreciate you saying that, because you know, in doing this work, it's like you're getting, I mean, the more I think about the fact that we're fielding crisis calls all the time, I'm like, whoa, that's heavy. And it's okay to feel that weight, but you have to find that way to kind of release some of that. And no, I just always remind myself too, I'm like, this is not my journey. That's, you know, this is their path. And if I can make that journey a little bit easier, a little bit lighter, then we've done our jobs, right? Because walking alongside someone, we have people that nobody's walking alongside them. And if we can meet them where they are, to do that, to take a little bit of that weight off and to let them know they're not alone. I think we've all had those conversations. At the end of the day, that's what someone wants. They can always get a little bit further ahead if they know that they have someone they can call, they can turn to, they can kind of offload a little bit. And then we have to take care of ourselves, because stuff's heavy. It's real heavy. So then kind of back to, whoa, what do we do to balance it? Heather, did you have something to add? Okay, perfect. I liked that you turned your camera on. It makes me happy. So a couple things that I've done. I am extroverted in my nature, and I think that let's all just take into consideration who we are as people within our center, and to not compare yourselves to the other people in the movement, in the center. If you're going to do anything within this, just remind yourself that, like, what do I have to add to this? Because everybody has something to give to this in a really profound way. Where we're our most damaging to ourselves is when I'm like, I'm in Montana. So if you're familiar with Michael Beers, he's incredible, right? And so when I started in this movement, I was like, how am I going to do this? It's so hard. But I'm not Michael Beers. That's not who I am. And I had to remind myself to use him as a beacon of like, that's so cool, he's doing that. But now, what can I do? What can I give? And so if you are more introverted, great. Know who you are in this movement and know what that looks like to be doing advocacy, starting groups, you know, starting book clubs, doing chess clubs, whatever it is, know where you are passionate about things and lean into that. So we did this thing, and I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to do these trainings, but they're called walk audits. Has anyone done a walk audit in your center or been trained to do a walk audit? So this to me was one of the coolest things, systems advocacy, to do. They started at the Rural Institute in Montana, and they got us all together. They called it interdisciplinary walk audit team. And so it was someone who's visually impaired, someone that uses a mobility device, business owners, local government. You get a group of people together and you just go on a walk in your community. And as you go on that walk, you start talking about what makes this place great? What makes me want to walk here? What makes me not want to walk here? What makes it hard for me to catch the bus from this location? Is there a bus that comes to this location? It's all of these elements of just literally taking a walk. And as you're having this dialogue, you open up folks' eyes to what could be better? How do we make this community feel really welcoming for the folks that live here? How do we make it more accessible? If you live in a snowy community, which I do, and I teach people to ride the bus in the winter, nothing opens your eyes up more to the challenge of being a bus rider than doing it in the winter and having to wait at a bus stop where nobody friggin' shoveled. Okay. I had a lady with a double car stroller, and I was like, okay, we got to ride the bus today. Nothing was harder than that. So now everyone I see, I'm like, have you shoveled your sidewalk? So then from that passion point, I got really worked up, and I'm headed into my worked up season because it will snow soon. I started a program called Snow Buddies, where I was like, if everyone could just look around them and see, do you have a neighbor that is elderly, has a disability, just can't shovel, pregnant, can't shovel their sidewalk, literally anything? Are we looking around to see how we can take care of one another? And what I'm learning from this process is there's a lot of people that just don't see what needs to be done, right? And so kind of from the walk audits, I started doing this. I am just a local pain in the neck to my local government. I'm like, hi, me again. Hey, hi, this is not working. Can you please enforce this ordinance? You know, those are the systems changes that we can do. I don't think people in their other jobs don't have the freedom that CILs have to really fight to make things better. I mean, we can be going to council meetings, going to things and being like, hi, did you think about this? What about this? And really, the more you do that, the more people are like, okay, well, we got the disability people here. Like, then they're thinking about it ahead of time instead of the aftermath. I don't know if anyone in your town has had a curb cut poured and then there's a 2-inch lip. And it's like, what is the point of this if you're not going to do it right? So that's part of our education piece. Our local ADA committee got kind of worked up. And so we just finished creating, and I'm happy to send it out to folks, an ADA self-assessment that you can use as a tool that if you go out to a business and you're like, hey, you know what? You don't have grab bars. You don't have, you got a doorknob and not a lever handle, right? We give it to them with all the examples of what does it look like to be accessible? And then you can self-assess. But it's meant to be a piece of paper, a rack card, to start a dialogue to just say, hey, things are not maybe how they should be. And I don't know if you know about it. Because what we learn is that people don't know what accessibility looks like. If you don't know anybody that needs the elements of accessibility, then you're not thinking about your built environment that way. And we have such an opportunity to open people's eyes to that. My husband and I own a small business. And so 2 small businesses now. And so we got ready to open the second store. And he's like, I don't have time to deal with that doorknob. I'm like, you are absolutely not opening the store with a doorknob. I will go and I will put it on. I will do this. But, you know, if we're going to walk this walk, we got to do it. Right. And so there's so much you can do related to your built environment. So if you're excited about that stuff, I mean, I had a training, and this is who I learned from was Mark Fenton. And please, I'll put his name in the chat right now. He is the coolest. If your center has money to bring him in, or your town, he will fire you up about your built environment and make you so excited to create change. Over COVID, I was working I started helping at our local food bank because I knew that several of the elderly folks that were volunteers couldn't go in there. So I started doing it. That opened my eyes all the way up. If you have a food bank in your town and you haven't gone down there and helped one day, I highly recommend that. People were leaving boxes of food over COVID because they didn't have a way to get it back to their house because there was not a bus that stopped there. My advocacy piece then was, hi, what are we doing? And so I fought, and now there's a bus stop at the food bank. Those are all those things just from our built environment, from the functional way that people get around our communities that we can be doing good. Thanks. The April office is really killing it down here in the chat. Okay, is there anyone else that's doing things like that you're like, this made me really excited? I love that. Do you like the idea of working in your built environment? Do you feel comfortable at council meetings?
Kathy, real quick, I just wanted to comment on Becky Clark's comment.
Oh, thanks.
She had said it has been hard because we are doing our regular job as well. And since COVID, we also have the CARES Act program and helping with rent and utilities.
Okay.
And I can see how it could be difficult because for us here, especially in rural areas, the CARES Act funding, it's hard because you have to be very specific and structured in the way you spend it, but it's also a chance for you to be very creative. We were able to help an individual get a ramp so that he can get in and out of his home. And so that was the fun part, just trying to figure out how to word it so that we can get it approved to get the individual what he needed. He got the ramp, and then I remember him just calling and him in tears, and his caregiver was just so excited as well because we actually got a way for him to get in and out of his home. And I think he hadn't been out of his home in 2 or 3 years, and he was a chair user. So it's just
that's amazing.
It's just things like that to where we kind of get so used to, oh, we don't have the grant for this, we don't have the funding for this, or this may not apply to us. But the creativity part is what I'm kind of focusing on, is just because I thought the same thing too. I don't know exactly how we're going to do this. And then after just working with the individual, seeing what he needed, and then using some creative language, and after like 3 no's from the ED, and we finally got it to work. So I understand where you're coming from, Becky.
Yeah. Becky, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I just saw that where Jamie had mentioned that they didn't have CARES Act funding, and ours has ended as well, but yet we still have more people coming in because the price of housing and utilities have gone up. And it's like, what do you do? How do you help these people?
I agree. We're dealing with that right now. In California, it's tough right now because they charging anywhere close to $2,500 for a studio right now. And even though you may have the money for the rent, the real biggest issue is the criteria in which they try to have you for an apartment. So if you're a youth and you got your own apartment, or you're trying to get your own apartment, but you may not have the credit, it's tough because you still got to pay application fees. Some apartments require a holding fee. Then if you do have the money, you got to make 2.5 times or three times the rent. And it's like everybody's struggling right now. So if you don't have that, you get a cosigner. And nobody wants to take that chance as a cosigner because you leaving it in somebody else's hands to keep your credit good. So the housing is a tough one. I hope we can.
The housing feels like the most impossible thing right now. Yeah. Molly?
Hi, this is Molly from Disability Action Center in the tiny town of Lewiston, Idaho. We didn't have any housing before COVID. Now we have absolutely minus housing, and the rents have skyrocketed. So now people are being displaced because they can't afford the rent. But I would suggest to all states, because the feds put out a ton of money, and it's called ERAP, E-R-A-P, Emergency Rental Assistance Programs. And you just need to contact your local HUD office and ask them about it and see how much money your state got, because it's available for any of us to put an applicant through. It takes 2 weeks to get approved and sent on their way. It pays back rent, back utilities, pays 3 months forward in rent. It also, if you reapply, pays another 3 months forward in rent. So that is something that we're using a lot of here. Ours is actually ran through Intermountain Fair Housing, but it's a great program. It's easy, quick, and it really helps people. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I think maybe it's named a little bit different within the different states, but if you're not familiar with that, what that is, call your local, whoever's doing housing in your area. Okay, yes, perfect. And then there was also one for connectivity. Do we have that late? Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Like if you need the internet, it gives it to you for a discounted rate. And I think that should be through all the states. Just as we're trying to connect folks with the resources, I think we're all in LEAP or LIHEAP, however your state says it, season right now, Affordable Connectivity Program. Yeah. Yeah, these ways to save money where we can. There's a lot of people that are not engaging in these processes. So as you're sitting with someone, sometimes you have all the best intentions in the world and then you forget to ask them something. If you have a list of things are available right now and you're meeting with somebody, make a list so that you're checking it off, because these really make a difference in folks' lives. And I think just this year, our low income energy assistance program started paying for water for folks too. And so those are just those little costs that over time. I have a gentleman I'm working with, he still has a landline phone and no voicemail. And it's like, I'm trying to figure out with him how we can make this better, right? And so it's like trying to convince them, how do we do this? And this is cheaper. And so there's also cell phone plans that work better for folks than other folks. All of that stuff. And this is why this is a really good time to have dialogue. If you know of like, hey, this, Cricket or whatever phone has worked really well for people, like put those resources in the chat, because those things, sometimes we have the best intentions of knowing them and we don't have the capacity, right? Where we get taxed out with trying to think and solve for all these different individuals. But if you have something that's working for someone, please share it, regardless of what it is. Even if it's in your own state, there might be somebody else on here that would really benefit from that. And all of it is really that evaluation when we meet with each person to try to get them get the most bang for the money that they're getting. When you talk to folks, it's like living on SSI when rent is $2,500 in California is not a thing, right? It's just like, that's not possible. And these are the stories. And I think the other part of centers' jobs too is these are the stories we have to tell. So when we go to the legislature, we have to tell those stories, but we need to learn how to tell those stories. I think, again, Michael Beers, no one is a better person to shift thinking for me than him, because it's like the way we're telling the stories of what's really hard right now. If we tell them right, and if we tell them about how they'll save money by doing these things at the legislature, we have power and we have all the information. We're getting calls all the time. Keep track of those people. If you're getting the same message, I don't know about you guys, but I need Medicare to start paying for personal care. I mean, that to me, that's the thing we need to be working on. Medicaid is not an option for so many people. Medicare, we have folks, I probably get 6 phone calls a week about the need for Medicare to pay for personal care. Those are the kind of urgent areas that I know we're all facing. How do we take this and make this an action step nationally? Because facilities don't have enough staff. People can't get in there. People are quitting their jobs to care for their aging parent. It's that, this cycle. You've all had the same conversation. What can we do? Because what we end up doing, a lot of us, is putting Band-Aids on things till the next person comes and we're like, shoot, how do we fix this? We need to start, we really need to be thinking systems change. We are the source of systems change. So as you find energy, which I know it's not easy, but if you see an end to write a letter, to compile some stuff, start being that person in your state to be like, we got to have a hard conversation. Things are not okay down here, because they're not going okay. And so if you have other things like that, please put them in the chat before we run out of time. Okay, Q-Link, phone and internet, okay. Thank you guys, thanks for putting stuff in the chat, that's the best. Okay, tourist areas are really hard. And let's talk about it. Airbnb and VRBO, all those things. We love them if we want to use them, but they've really made our communities really hard to get rentals in, right? Because people are like, I'm just going to rent this out on short term. That has caused part of the housing crisis as well. if you go to any tourist town, and I'm sure Jamie's knows about it, it's just like, we need people to do the jobs in the towns. There's nowhere for them to live. These are cyclical problems that are happening so many places. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Did anyone else have any kind of topics that came up for them or ideas that you were like, I did this and I think it would be fun to duplicate? I have a question that's been kind of burning for me before we get off. I'm excited about something. I'm just going to talk till somebody steps in. Going back to Arius's creative thinking stuff, a number of years ago, I partnered with another disability organization and we built a teaching kitchen in an old gym space. And we did that through partnership with our local technical college, so the college that has a construction program. We can be really creative with those service learning opportunities that they offer through colleges to try to make change for folks. Sometimes those places have automotive department things. So if someone's having car issues, they can go in there, have their car worked on for much less than, because they're looking for those kind of opportunities. So if you have ideas for things, don't forget to start going out and doing outreach to those places and asking, how can we partner? These are some of the barriers I'm running into. For me, ramps is a constant state of need. It's just like, and when you need a ramp, you needed it yesterday and you don't have $4,000 to build a ramp. And so it's like, that is a need that's always showing up. And it's like, how do we work with an entity to create a sustainable ramp building program that's affordable or costs nothing for folks to access accessibility into their home? I have a million passion points from working here for this period of time. And they always grow. We started a Dungeons and Dragons group a couple weeks ago. I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, but one of my coworkers does. And that's been really fun because that's drawing in a new crowd of individuals that want to have peer relationship, and we can make it about advocacy without it feeling like, hi, this is advocacy and this is how you be an advocate. It's like you can learn through other ways. So if anyone else has any other ideas, any last thoughts before we hop off? Okay, Justin, we've been trying to start a D&D group ourselves. Okay, and I think there might be ways to get grants, right? Maybe there's some small grants you can get in your own community to pay for the board, the dice, the little figurines. I don't know any of the Dungeons and Dragons terms. Justin, I have a contact at my center. If you want me to connect you via email, I'd be happy to do that. And he could talk with you about it because it's, he got it started and he has a whole dialogue, a whole narrative that's going to be about advocacy. Awesome. And then I'll just put my email in the chat too. If anything came up and you wanted to ask me any questions, I'm happy to help answer. I don't know everything. I'm always learning and I'm always trying to do what I can to make the folks that I'm serving, to make their lives just even a little bit easier. And that's hard sometimes because we're also showing up as people that might be having a bad mental health day or might be having pain or, all the various things that go on with our own lives. And so I think if there's other resources about how you're finding balance within your work, about, we took a training, it really helped me to stay centered, to know how to deal with crisis, share those with April, even after, to send out, because I think we're all looking for resources all the time to help us feel comfortable in our jobs so that we feel like we're doing a good job, but also that we're supported so that we can continue to do these jobs for a long time. Arius, you got anything else to add before we close her out today?
Nope, other than thank you all for listening to me talk. I know I'm long-winded at times. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad. Arius and I have known each other for a long time. And so I think it's really fun to have to get to be back together. And hopefully next year we can all meet up at an April conference and really spend time doing that. Jamie, did you have something to say, or are you saying goodbye? Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you all for joining our session. We've really enjoyed it. Don't forget to take time at the end of this session to complete the short evaluation and let us know how we can continue to improve, what you liked, what you'd like to see more of. And if you're registered for the youth conference, please join us back at 4 p.m. Pacific or 7 p.m. Eastern. And we really hope that you are able to join us tomorrow for our final day of the conference, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific or 12 p.m. Eastern. Thanks so much and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.